Hey guys, it's Weebs, and I am here with Michelle Belanger, and we are going to talk a little bit about spiritual protection. So, Michelle, I had an incident recently when we were at Fairfield County Infirmary. Something that in my paranormal investigating and my life as a sensitive I had never experienced before. And that was this real, visceral, emotional, I would not call it attack, but a reaction to something that happened there. We were in the basement of this location, and there was a young woman who came to me at first very, she approached with caution. And then as our time went on through the quarantine, she showed me how she died, but then she actually made me physically feel it later. And so it came to the point that I was vomiting, choking, struggling to breathe, and had to be taken from the building. So I guess my question would be, number one, is there a way to prevent that from happening? Number two, when it happens, what's the best way to deal with it?
Okay, well, I'm going to deal a little bit with number two first, because you already did one of the best things, which was you didn't automatically assume that it was an attack. Because sometimes we'll have a strong reaction to something.
Right.
And if you assume it's an attack, a natural response then is to be fearful and to panic. Right. Which tends to put you in a weakened state, which just makes it easier to be overwhelmed, whether or not it's an attack. And oftentimes it's not. A lot of things that people report as psychic attacks or attacks by spirits are more that there's just so much to experience. They are so intense that it overwhelms you, and you can have physical pain. And it might seem counterintuitive that a psychic experience can give you physical symptoms, but having experienced it now, it can in fact happen. So the other thing was you were removed from the building. So when I teach psychic self-defense, like and in the Ghost Hunter Survival Guide, one of the things is first assessing, like, what am I feeling? Am I feeling this because I'm, what are my expectations? Am I afraid? Like the internal check of like, is this real? And totally this is happening. Where is it coming from? And if you're in distress, before you protect yourself at all, what you need to do is stop what's happening. Most often, removing yourself from the location is going to very effectively do that. You break the contact. Whether it's the room that you just walked into that happens to be the one that's making you feel like you're being choked, or the whole building. In extreme cases, I always recommend just remove yourself from the building, go out somewhere cool, calm, hug a freaking tree, anything that just breaks your whole routine. Like pull your shoes and socks off and make little fists with your toes in the grass, like something very visceral that brings you back to your body. And then the next stages to deal with it are also the stages that you would go through to help set up protections. So I talk a lot about grounding, centering, and shielding. And so once you've been overwhelmed and you've dealt with the immediate crisis of getting yourself into some position where you can actually think a little, because I understand in that moment it can be really hard to think. Having people that you rely on who can kind of be your spotters when you are going into some place, who can help you when you're like in over your head, or when you've just been overwhelmed. Like, you may not even be in over your head, you just may be experiencing so much. Having spotters is another good useful thing. So you've gotten yourself out. The next thing is to just let go of what you were feeling. Flush it out of your system. There's a lot of different ways to do this. It all comes down to different techniques of focusing your mind, your will. One that works for me is to go somewhere and run cold water over my hands and my wrists. And the very visceral feeling of that, and the associations of cleaning and cleansing help me let go of what I'm feeling. And take as long as you want to do with that. If you lock yourself in a bathroom and you're just like, hands under the sink for 5 minutes, if that's what it takes, that's what it takes. So you clear it out, and then you collect yourself and get a better sense of your boundaries. And that's what centering really is you find your center. You find where is you inside you, and where is a calm point that feels like you inside you, because that lets you have a better sense of what is outside of you.
Right.
And once you can navigate inside versus outside, you can set a clearer boundary between you and things that would be overwhelming you. And that's shielding. Right. Shielding is just having formalizing the boundaries around you. In a lot of shows, you'll hear visualize yourself surrounded by white light. And it's not so much the white light that's doing it, it's the fact that you're visualizing something that makes you feel safe,
right?
That makes you feel that you do in fact have boundaries, that you will not be a victim. And that last part is very essential. Think about any physical self-defense class you've ever taken. You have to give off a certain vibe. And if you're worried that you're gonna be a victim, if you are walking across a dark parking lot at night and you are looking twitchy and looking like you're going to get jumped, people can spot that, and you look like easy prey.
Right.
On the other side, it's the same thing. If you are scared, if you don't have a good sense that you can protect yourself, things are going to be like, they're going to test those boundaries. So again, grounding, let it go. Whatever way you can. Centering, find your still point, know where your inside and outside are, and then establish those boundaries, affirm them. Picture it as white light, picture it as, brick by brick, you build a fortress around yourself, lead plates, fire, whatever is your thing.
So basically, by looking like psychic prey, you become psychic prey.
You certainly put out more of
the vibe.
Yeah, more of the vibe. And somebody who's new at stuff and doesn't really know that they should be going in with some boundaries. You're just, you're like, hey, I want to experience everything, skin off. It's like walking naked into a forest of ice. You want to be wearing some clothes. You want to be, sometimes you want to be wearing armor. But at the very least, you want some nice hiking boots, and, tough pants that are going to keep the burrs and stuff off your shins. And it's the same thing with psychic stuff. You want to have something that you have garbed yourself with.
Right. So Becca, she's kind of my spotter here. When I exited the building and started to calm, she actually kind of physically laid hands on me. And so I don't know how it worked, but it worked.
She probably learned the technique from me. I'm betting. So Becca, as you know, used to be psychic to the point of it was debilitating.
Right.
If she didn't get a handle on it, she was not going to be a functional human being. And she came to me at the place where she was still really navigating that. And that's where there were times where she would be completely overwhelmed by stuff, just the sensations, to the point where she wouldn't even be able to verbalize stuff in English anymore. It would come out as glossolalia. And there's a technique that I'll do, and that somebody who can work with energy can do. And what I'll usually do is put my hands on somebody's back. I mean, there's a calming sensation with that as well. The tactile, the physical part of it also is helping pull the person back to their body, so that naturally and unconsciously you're shutting down some of your extrasensory perceptions. But in addition to that, you connect to the person's energy. And for me, what I visualize is my energy, calm and soothing, washing over them like slow cleansing waters. That's just helping to smooth down how they're feeling, that's dealing with their emotions, but is also clearing off the stuff that has got into them and made them overwhelmed.
Right.
So it's a grounding and a cleansing, but basically I'm doing that grounding, centering, shielding for you.
Right.
To get the person to the point where they can then do it themselves. Because again, in that crisis, it's incredibly hard to get your legs back under you enough to think to do anything.
So would you describe that as, is it a form of Reiki? Is it almost like a healing process at that point? You're putting a psychic Band-Aid on.
Yeah, it's working with the same techniques, the same mechanics. Somebody who knows Reiki would definitely be able to do stuff with that. Qigong, healing hands, they all are tapping into very much the same sort of technique for dealing with a person's energy. You don't have to call it anything. I mean, I'm more about like, I don't care what it is. Did it work?
Did it work?
It worked.
Perfect. Right.
And you know, as somebody who's sensitive, how do you stop it from happening again? Sometimes the answer is by running into that wall several more times until you start to notice the tells for when you are actually getting overwhelmed. Because every single person I know has to hit that wall at least once and actually have something like just completely overwhelm them to realize, one, that it can happen, what it feels like, that it sucks, and then how to come back from it. And over time you'll learn that there's actually a lead up to getting that overwhelmed. And you learn to walk the line, because your job with a team, if you're working as a psychic, is to actually like immerse yourself in that, but not lose yourself in it. And everybody has different tells. Like some people will start to feel shaky, they'll find it harder to verbalize. They may just get dizzy or spacey. Some people just feel like tingling everywhere. Like there's a whole host of different things, and only by doing it over and over again will you know exactly what yours are. But then you'll learn to navigate. Like, here's where I'm okay. Here's where if it's too much more intense, that I'm kind of getting into trouble. Here's where I'm like really wading into deep waters, but it's worth it.
Right.
And then here's where I'm going to tip over to a point where I'm no longer useful to me or anybody else.
Right.
And it's your call for like how far down the rabbit hole you're willing to go.
Knowing and establishing the boundaries first.
Yes.
And then not getting to that point that you have to stop and say, okay.
Yeah.
The one experience was enough for me. And you're right, I didn't read into the signs as it was happening, because she didn't appear frightening.
Yeah.
And she if anything, she had come to me through the day, and she was very at a standoffish point. I don't know that I want to approach you. But when she did, it was like all at once, just a flood.
Well, it probably wasn't even like that she was frightening. That stuff was so present and so real. She finally found someone she could communicate with.
Right.
And she dumped all of it on you all at once.
She was terrified.
Yeah. And
she was terrified.
And one of the things that I think a lot of people don't get with most psychics, you know, you may calmly report like, well, I feel this, or the spirit's feeling this. You're feeling it.
Right.
Like it's in you, even though it's not you.
Right.
So, you know, there are, you know, phantom pains that you may have. You may feel a hand around your throat in the case of someone who is strangled. Like there are echoes. And learning to navigate when it's too much. And knowing that you're going to fall on your face if you go much further.
Right.
But the other really important thing is knowing you've got people on your team you can rely on, even if you fall.
Exactly.